Amen. So here's a paradox, the first of several paradoxes in this sermon. We've all been in lockdown, confined to barracks, and yet we've been more active than usual as a congregation, it seems to me. We've been active in Black Lives Matter. We've hosted webinars on climate change. We've supported the Robes Project and the Homeless Hotel. We've flown the flag for Pride. We've clapped for the NHS. And we've been as generous as we can be towards people in need and towards one another. In a time when the globe is closed down, global connectivity has increased. It's a paradox. And here's another paradox as expressed by Jesus. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. I like to imagine John and Jesus talking to each other, sitting perhaps in a recently reopened pub. John takes a sip of his water, tap water, and he says to Jesus, whatever we do is wrong, isn't it? They complain about me being too ascetic and you being too worldly. We play the flute and they don't dance. We wail and they don't mourn. And Jesus, with a gin and tonic, or maybe a mojito, replies, I know, it drives me up the wall. Sometimes I feel like opting out completely and going back to Nazareth to be a carpenter again. But I'm glad that at least a few people seem to get it. Rarely the smart ones at the top of the pile, but the children and the people who are grounded in their day-to-day lives. It feels as though wisdom is not in the wise, or understanding in the intelligent, doesn't it? Yeah, says John, it's a paradox, isn't it? They keep a bit of silence. And then Jesus says to John, would you like a mojito? John says, no, I'm fine. I'll stick to my water, thanks. At the heart of this paradox is the relationship between the world and God. And it's this that I want to talk about today. I want to expand a little on the paragraph at the end of my sermon from last week when I said, above all, it's our task to act and speak in hope. Because we know that the whole universe is held in the palm of God's hand like a hazelnut. And that the real power is not the power of hatred and fear, is not the power of demons, but is the power of love which undergirds, holds, creates, and keeps every particle of God's creation, every leaf, every tree, every cloud, every star, every hair on the head of every person in the world. But how can I be so sure about the power of love? How can I speak with such confidence about the absolutely rock-solid undergirding which holds all of us wherever we are in the vice-like grip of God's love? I'm sure that it very often feels nothing like that to you, especially now in the middle of the pandemic when the future is very unsure and there is still illness all around us and amongst us. I'm sure that very often to many of you, these claims feel unreal, to be doubted, a little off the wall, perhaps. I'm sure that many of you feel exhausted at the moment and perhaps a little afraid as things open up. But there is anxiety about the environment, about the economy, about the second wave. Perhaps it feels as if hope is a luxury we can't afford at the moment. And if faith is, as the letter to the Hebrews says, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, then perhaps faith is a paradox too far. Well, let me urge you not to be put off by the paradoxical nature of our faith. As the gospel says so clearly and so illogically, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I've been reading this week the work of the French mystic Teilhard de Chardin. There he is. He was a Jesuit and a scientist. He was a paleontologist and a geologist, to be precise. And he spent lots of time in China studying early fossils. But before then, from 1908 to 1912, he lived in Hastings, where he developed his concept of the profound interrelatedness of matter and spirit. So that's something that Hastings can put in its cap and be proud of. He wrote two well-known books, The Phenomenon of Man and The Divine Milieu. And in 1962, several of his works were banned by the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith. But now his work is seen by many as being prescient, or indeed prophetic. He brings together the vastness of the universe with the intimacy of love. And he connects the intimacy of the created world to the vastness of God. Teilhard was awestruck by the beauty and complexity of the earth and the universe. He was transfixed by the extraordinary diversity of the natural world, the flowers, the rocks, the continents, and the stars. For him, the whole of creation was evolving all the time into increased complexity until, in the end, it would achieve oneness and completeness in union with God. For Teilhard, the human race is integrally part of the universe. He believed it's our calling to go more and more deeply into the material world, to understand it and to investigate it thoroughly, because it's through plumbing the mysteries of creation that we come closer to the mysteries of God. Matter, he said, is spirit moving slowly enough to be seen. He saw that at the heart of matter is mystery, paralleled by the insights of quantum physics, and that beyond the mystery lay the creative power of the love of God. In fact, he was quoted by Bishop Michael Curry in the sermon which he preached at Harry and Meghan's wedding. Bishop Curry quoted him as saying, "Someday, after we have mastered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire." And it all came together for Teilhard in the act of Holy Communion. He said, "Christ, for whom and in whom we are formed, reveals himself in each reality around us. As our humanity assimilates the material world, and as the Eucharist assimilates our humanity, the transformation step by step irresistibly invades the universe. It is the fire that sweeps over the heath, the stroke that vibrates through the bronze." So Teilhard is there in the marketplace, dancing when Jesus plays the flute and mourning when John the Baptist wails. He sees that God is the heart of the matter, and the matter of the heart is God. So that's why I can speak with such confidence about the reality of hope. That's why I can say with absolute confidence, we know that the whole universe is held in the palm of God's hand like a hazelnut. And the real power is not the power of hatred or fear, is not the power of demons, but is the power of love, which undergirds, holds, and creates and keeps every particle of God's creation. Every leaf, every tree, every cloud, every star, every hair on the head of every person in the world. Teilhard said this, "Do not forget that the value and interest of life is not so much to do conspicuous things as to do ordinary things with the perception of their enormous value. It's this which undergirds me, and which undergirds the call of Christianity to action. The power of love is what undergirds the protests around Black Lives Matter, the actions in support of the NHS, our work on climate, our work on inclusion, our work on homelessness, the attention we try to give to the poorest and the most vulnerable, the ways we pray and the ways we try to build community. Even though we're only the minutest of specks in the vastness of the universe and in the infinity of the material world, whatever we do matters because we're given our lives by the creative power of love. We will get things wrong sometimes, and what we do won't make a difference sometimes. But at other times we will get things right, and at other times, little by little, we will help to transform this created order. We will help to vanquish the demons of injustice and hurt and violence and pain, and we will give wings to the angels of light and love and hope and truth. We will do all this because we are loved by God, and because we are loved by God, we can love God's world and all God's people in it. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Amen.